Hello, I'm Glenn W. Hunter, and with me today is our subject matter expert, Shor Denny. This is the three C's of social emotional learning. And what we're going to talk about today, in the midst of all the insanity that we've had to endure recently, and with regards to what's going on in Washington, D.C., we're going to talk about what kids learned about America. Sure, a lot of TV images, a lot of people holding their breath, trying to figure out what was going on with the rioting and the threats and all of that in DC. And all the while, kids are watching and learning. When you see that, what's going through your mind as someone who interacts and develops young people about what is it they're seeing? What do you think they are seeing?
The truth. I think they are seeing the truth. I think that America is finally seeing itself. And in that truth, they are seeing the inequality and the injustice that have been going on for generation after generation after generation. So it's the truth. What they're seeing is a country that has been going through the democratic experiment and is still going through it. They're seeing that it's not a given that we wake up each morning and we have the liberties that we have, that there actually is work that needs to go on to create a democracy and to keep it.
So, as this truth is coming out, and I really want to focus on some of your experiences, right? Both of us, but particularly you, there's a privilege that we have to varying degrees that we get to communicate and interact with school-aged young people. And when you think about those interactions, what will those young people remember the most from January 6, 2021?
I believe that it will be a day that will go down in infamy. And I think that the main thing that they're going to see is that the police allowed it to happen. That there was no control, there were no authorities. That the authorities were part of the problem. So I think again what they're going to see is that America is something that we have to work at, and that every person in this country at a certain age is responsible for understanding our history, understanding how our democracy works, and making sure it stays a democracy.
Well, I like the point you made about understanding how our democracy works. Because when we hear that word, we think, well, everybody has a voice, right? But I think what we saw during the event at the Capitol is that not all voices are equal. I mean, there seem to be more authority in some voices than others, whether it's through violence or through privilege or through their role in the government. Did you see anything different that said our voices really are equal in our democracy?
No, and um, I think that that is something that our youth, although it's horrible for them to see it, I think it needs to be seen. How lax the last generation has been, especially over voting. I think that maybe this is something that we needed for our youth to understand and for us adults to remember that this is something we work at. We don't sit at home and don't vote and don't understand who our local officials are, and don't, that from our youth that we need to have an understanding of what is going on in our local government and in our nation. Even as a child, there should be some fundamental understanding. I think that as adults, as teachers and educators, that we have a responsibility to ensure that our youth get more than just that political science class, right? That social studies class, that one time in, a 10-year period of education, but that we all understand what is required of our democracy. It's a new day. It's a new day. And it's a day where we and our youth can now make the change, can make the difference. And that is through us adults providing that knowledge, providing education. And that means we adults have to gain that education first. So we need to start understanding and researching, reading books, going back and finding out what is generational poverty. Why do white people think that they are supreme? Because there's a reason for it, and it's historical, right? It's written down over and over again that our country set it up that way. It didn't manifest one day. They didn't get birth and be superhuman and think that they were, better than all other races on this earth. It didn't just happen. It was taught, and it was supported with systematic racism, systematic discrimination. Our youth need to see that. Before Trump got elected, my daughter was in high school, and
Mhm.
she was angry with me. I would give her those talks, the black talks. When you go out there, this may happen, do this, all of those things that I would tell her. And she'd go, Mom, stop putting your old stuff on me. She was like, that stuff does not happen anymore. That is in the past. And she literally would get mad at me and go, why are you putting your baggage on me? What that did was it did not prepare her for when Trump went through his election and got elected. And those Caucasian people on her campus reacted and treated her differently. She then was not prepared because she had a belief that all of the racism and all of the inequality had left. So I think right now she has a better understanding of the world she lives in and what her role is. And I think that's what we all need to know. What is our role as a Democrat in our country? And we need to teach that to our youth. I think that's the only way for them to understand what has happened and understand how to move forward in a positive way, is to understand that we are all working on America together.
I really appreciate the way you talked about their role in the world and how it fits into the scheme of the country. I think that's something that gets glossed over as we're communicating with our young people, and particularly in the schoolhouse. One of the things that we saw in the coverage from the events at the Capitol is that there were a lot of law enforcement officers with guns and gear, and they came from different jurisdictions, and it was really difficult to see who was doing what. How do we communicate as a culture, as a community? How do we communicate to our children who is actually in charge? Where does the authority lie?
At this time, I think that's a joke question, right? Is that a trick question? Because there is no authority at this time. For the next 14 days, 13 days, there is no authority, right? We have a lame duck president that's not taking any responsibility for anything, and is inciting riots and inciting a civil war. So there is no one in charge right now, and I think they should understand that. I think that the truth of this, again, is what they need to know. We are as traumatized as they are. We are trying to figure it out just as them. We also saw state legislators involved in the coup that they tried to
Hmm.
perform yesterday. We saw on TV, we saw police officials in 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 it, doing it, not stopping it. Our youth, we have to remember, for the last year have seen protests and have seen people been beaten. They've seen the police pepper spraying and shooting rubber bullets at peaceful protests. And then yesterday they saw a violent protest with none of that happening. None of that happening. But the perpetrators were white. So I think that our country as a whole saw the truth yesterday, and now it is up to us to make this country the country that it said it was, that it has never been, but that we have always said that it is.
I really respect how you emphasize revealing a truth to our observers, whether it's our youth or even our adults who seem to be thrown off a little bit about what they've seen. One of the keys, I believe, to the cognitive dissonance of it is the fact that there's so many images coming from so many different perspectives, and a lot of that is driven by social media, quite frankly. And I think social media came into play with these events much more than what we've seen previously, and definitely with um, number 45 presiding and the way he uses his social media so aggressively. But what we have seen is that it's been revoked at certain times. Even as a leader, his privileges have been revoked at certain times. What lessons can we pass on to our community's children about social media based on the poor choices that the president has made?
Well, I think it's quite interesting to see that social media is the only place that shut him down. It wasn't our nation's legislators, it wasn't our nation's police, but it was social media. So actually, people always give social media a bad name. I think in this respect, we have to respect Facebook for blocking Trump permanently, and Twitter for attempting. At least they're working towards something that should be for the good of America. So I think that what our youth are seeing in that is that there are consequences, although they came from an unlikely place. There are consequences for lying all the time and misrepresenting the truth and inciting people. What I hope is that they will continue to have some lessons here, that the few people, the very few people that they arrested yesterday, that they do get prosecuted, and that our leaders who were involved in this get punished. Now, with that happening, our youth can begin to see the rightness coming of what has happened. I think the main thing is for us as individuals and us to tell our youth what America is, who America is. And then they can see for themselves who was wrong and who was bad. I don't think we need to tell them that. I think we simply need to educate them on what this great experiment really is.
It's funny as you talk about, who is in charge, who's responsible. We're looking at those components of it. I think it's an important lesson for our young people to grab that lens now where they are effectively questioning authority. Not like I'm not going to do my homework and you can't make me, but really understanding Miss Smith said I got in trouble and these are the reasons why, and I don't think that's right. I think we have to be able to generate constructive conversation and challenging the authority and why is that child wrong in the eyes of Miss Smith. There has to be accountability from the lowest level to the highest levels of leadership. Do you think that's an important next step?
Oh, yes, definitely. But think of the millions. I'm going to say millions, not even thousands. I'll say thousands. Think of the thousands of youth that are going to use this. All right.
Mhm.
There was just a scenario given earlier that I'll repeat kind of. So say a youth in 10th grade is running a track. They're running in track and they lose. And they say, I didn't lose. They refuse to accept the fact that they didn't run faster than their opponent. So instead of conceding and saying, oh, I didn't win the prize, they go and beat up their opponent that won.
Mhm.
That is what we just saw our government do. So, so we need to express to our youth and help them understand how wrong that way of thinking is. That I just want to really say how warped and how un-American, I have, let me put those quotes there on that, it is to believe that you live above the rules, you live above the law, that you are different. This is, I guess, where the collectivism of what Trump tried to do, the nationalism viewpoint, is that we are a collective, we are not one. But with what is being done has been showing that one is supreme of all, right?
Yeah.
So what we need to help our youth understand is that we as a group are more important, that the success of America depends on us together.
Sure, I cannot agree with you more on that. The success together is the strength of America. And we have to remember that. I think internationally, we took a large step backwards in the last day or so. And I think that's going to come to fruition and will be even more revealed in the weeks to come as we do exercise our transition of power. But I think that I want to make sure that what I bring home for our audience is that the three C's are important for a reason because they do create a foundation for the development of our youth: community, communication, collaboration. Can we get along? Do we belong together? Can we at least sit down and talk? And I think our leadership, not just the guy, but our leadership failed in regards to that measurement in the last day or so. And I think
Last 4 years.
the I will not split hairs on the time, but I do think we have to be intentional, and it starts literally with the conversations we're having. And again, with the young people, we have the opportunity to both influence and work with in the school systems. We have to make sure they understand these are tools that will help them succeed functionally as opposed to demanding that they won the race, even though the other person crossed the finish line sooner. Parting shots. What's the last thing you want our audience to know about what we saw and why it's important to our community?
What we saw was the reason that we all need to participate in our democratic experience. What we saw yesterday was the truth of the discrimination and inequality and the privilege that has existed in this country since it's been created. But along with that, what we saw was that we gained the Senate. We have the Congress, and that we as a nation have the power and the strength and the people to, and with the belief to fix and to mend what we just had happen to our nation. This is but a riff. We are a large and beautiful and wondrous country made up of all types of ethnic groups and cultures, and that beauty, that experiment is going to win out. And we just need to remember that our participation is the key.
Once again, our subject matter expert, Shor Denny, and I am Glenn W. Hunter. We are the three C's of social emotional learning: community, communication, collaboration. And we welcome your input. Pass the podcast on, create comments in the comments area. Challenge us to bring the facts that you need to develop the community that you want to control, that you want to own, that you want to live in. Once again, our subject matter expert, Shor Denny, Glenn W. Hunter. And as always, particularly in these perilous times, I implore you to be safe. Thank you.